Thank you very much for joining this session. My name is Aníbal SABATER, and I am the Vice President of the UIA's Commission on the Future of the Lawyer. I'm also a partner with the law firm of Chaffetz Lindsey, a dispute boutique in New York. It's my great honor today to moderate this discussion on a topic that I suspect ranks very high in the concerns of everyone in the audience. Probably one of the most significant concerns anyone has, right after the obvious concern for the health and well-being of kin, friends, and self in these challenging days. And that is the concern about our professional practices. How is COVID-19 affecting what we do? What can we do to ease the situation? And how are things likely to be shaped up in the long term? For many of you, some of what we are seeing may not be absolutely new. We're seeing some practices decrease in activity, such as project finance or corporate, in most places around the world. We are also seeing some law firms letting employees go. These were things we also saw during the 2008 to 2010 global economic crisis. But now the crisis has a new magnitude. Its reach is broader, both geographically and industry-wise. There are few countries, if any, which have not been subject to measures of social distancing and even lockdowns. And there are few industries, again, if any, that have not had to experience challenges in the supply chain, the disruption of their day-to-day activities. To address these topics, we have a formidable panel comprising practitioners from all around the world, 3 continents, big law, smaller firms, very different practices. I'll introduce them alphabetically. First of all, from Singapore, we have Clarence Fu, who is a second-generation partner in his family-managed law firm. His areas of practice are in real estate, succession planning, and probate. He has been a member of the UIA since 2011. Next is James Moore, who is a commercial arbitrator and mediator in New York State. He has been active in the UIA for several years, and in 2011 was the president of the Miami Congress. He's a graduate of the Cornell Law School, and for many years he was a partner at a large New York-based law firm. Then we have Sibylle Schumacher, partner with Pinsent Masons and the head of the firm's German dispute resolution group. She's based in Munich, and her practice focuses on complex litigation and arbitration matters, especially those concerning infrastructure, real estate, and science and technology. They're going to be sharing their views and their experiences with us today, starting with how does this new normal COVID-19 prompted affecting their lives, their professional lives. And there are going to be very few who, after this crisis is over, will come back to work having had no exposure to this COVID-19 new normal that we refer to in the title of the session. We thought it would be a good idea to start the session by having our panelists explain how this new normal is affecting them, how it is affecting their day-to-day life in the law firm. And I guess I'll start with you, Jim. How's the new normal for you and for people that you're seeing around you?
Aníbal, that's a question that I don't think we can have a precise answer to at this point. But by the way, I'd like to say good morning to everybody who's watching and listening to us. It's nice to be here today. Answering your question is difficult because we've now been shut down. That is, our offices have not been operating for almost 2 months. So to guess what's going to happen when the doors are opened in a week or two is just pure speculation. Nevertheless, I think there are some obvious things that are going to happen and some not so obvious things. First of all, the way we operate our offices is going to change. Will there be social distancing in conference rooms? We go into grocery stores and drugstores now and find that we cannot get closer than 6 feet to people. Will that be true in our offices? Will there be, in a conference room, will there be shields, plastic walls between the people in the conference rooms? Another question that we don't have answers to is whether we're going to have to wear masks when we go into our offices, and if so, how long will those go on? I think too about the elevators that we take to get into our offices. My office is on the 13th floor. The elevators typically have 4 or 5 people in them. Will social distancing mean that we can only have 1 or 2 people in an elevator? So those are just a few of the obvious things that are going to happen. There are other less obvious, more subtle changes that I think are going to take place. I think a lot of lawyers will discover that working remotely at our homes has been a very pleasant experience. And there may not be a rush to go back to the law offices when all of this comes to an end. I think that the trend of working remotely, which had been going on for some time here in the US, will only be accelerated by the arrival of the virus. One other thing, and then I'll let others speak, is that I think that the arrival of the virus will enhance the need to have technology available to all lawyers. We've all become technologically quite proficient, younger lawyers better than lawyers of my age, but I think it's going to be impossible to succeed without an enhanced skills of technology and the ability to use and afford them. So I'll let some others speak at this point.
Thank you very much, Jim. Sibylle, you come from a or really entirely diametrically opposed type of practice to Jim. You're now with a large law firm, one of the largest in the world. How's the new normal for you and your law firm, and how is it expected to last in time? What's its expected legacy for you and your law firm?
Well, good afternoon, first of all, from Munich. I'm sorry that I have to use my mobile, but I wanted to ensure you all hear me correctly, and my audio system wasn't working well, even though I am one of the few who is already back in the office. So there are some people in our office who may be there, and I have to say the lucky one who is amongst them. So I agree with Jim that technical issues will be important. Nevertheless, what is a law firm without its people? So I think we have the people at its core and need to consider how do we work together in future? How do we integrate team members while most of us are working from home or are working remotely? I have to admit that while before COVID-19 it was okay for us to have some people working for some days, maybe in the home office, I was never amongst the ones who thought we would do this for weeks or even months, as we do it now. And so when we were facing the lockdown here in Bavaria, which was quite surprisingly or suddenly, we were sending more than 70 to 80% of our team immediately at home, and we had 3 new people starting in our team. So what to do in order to ensure they become team members? So this is what we did. We arranged for joint lunches. I doubt that it's very nice to see a partner having a lunch on the laptop. Nevertheless, people are so used to having lunches together as lawyers in Germany. So this was a real routine. Then we implemented, or we are still having already the buddy system. Nevertheless, we ensured that the buddies we are having really get in contact with new people, ensure that they are taken care of. In addition thereto, we have regular Teams meetings. Not only for business purposes, one has to admit, but for social purposes as well. Having a glass of tea or gin tonic is nice over the laptop as well. And last but not least, what I think is important is that if you have to speak to your colleague, make sure not only to send an email, this might be the quicker option, but I would really recommend pick up the phone, ask him how he feels or she feels, and then come to the point of talking legal issues. That's from my side.
Here. I completely agree with everything you said, Sibylle. Something we experienced at the firm is that because of the unexpected arrival of the crisis, we suddenly had to go into remote work mode within days of having brought new people to the team. In fact, we had already extended offers to people who joined us during the remote work period and who have never really set a foot on the actual physical usual offices. And it takes an extra effort to make sure that everyone feels integrated and becomes fully aware of firm's practices and the way of doing things. You have to mentor people remotely, which is a bit of an unexpected challenge, but a welcome one. And I think it leads to new types of brotherhood, if you will, within the firm. Clarence, I'll turn to you. And number one, thank you very much, because of all the speakers, you are the one who's joining probably the most presently challenged time zone. It's almost Wednesday for you, right?
So, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, good evening to everybody. I'm Clarence, and I'm from Singapore, which some of you might not know. We follow the English common law tradition. So I wanted to share about how we handle day-to-day and our craft as lawyers. So I'm sure that you need access to the ongoing files and matters that you are working on before you went into lockdown. In some cases, you need access to precedents, and these precedents could be from a previous file involving the same client. It could be precedents from a previous file involving a different client that you thought might be adaptable to the file that you're working on. If the case is novel and if there are legislative or case law updates, then you'll find that you need to do further research, and this without access to your firm's library or to your court library. Now, fortunately, many of such legislation is available online these days. However, if you are consulting specialist tax, or you are aware that there are some vendors which provide specialist guidance on how to access, how to tackle certain topics which you might be unfamiliar with, then these are avenues to pursue as well. As a small firm myself, I do not have access to all different kinds of specialist advice, but it's something that I've been looking into as well. Besides your actual craft, I think one other thing to highlight is that some of us will have a firm to manage as well, and that means a lot of different banking needs. I do a fair amount of real estate, and in the course of a sale or purchase, sometimes my firm will hold on to stakeholding monies, which will be released at the end of the completion. It might be the same for you if you have escrow monies as part of any agreement that you're working on. And of course, during this lockdown, you still have to have a system of creating bills, being able to monitor the payment of bills by your clients. You have to have arrangement where you continue to pay your employees, same or a reduced rate. Besides the employees, of course, you have overheads to pay as well. It could be your rent, it could be to third-party vendors as well. is some things that for a smaller firm we have to think about. I'm assuming that as for the bigger firms, they have special departments that will be able to look into this, but it's something for a smaller firm that would have to think about. I think one thing which has helped me a lot is that we've had practice management and a document management software, but there's more things to this which I realized, because there are some who adopt a server or an on-site server on your firm premises, and some firms which prefer to go by way of cloud. And then for me, I have a VPN access to my firm, and that has helped me to gain access to the precedents and the methods that I'm working on.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Clarence. And I think you're raising an issue that's very significant and is frequently overlooked, as you said, online fora and discussions. Those of us in management of our firms are experiencing very unprecedented questions nowadays. Sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected. The expected include, well, what do you do when you have a client who is based in and paying from an entirely locked down jurisdiction? I do work for someone in Latin America who needs to wire money to our offices, but due to foreign exchange controls, they need approval from their home country to send the money out of their jurisdiction, and the government's completely shut down, and it's not entirely clear when the payments are going to come in. If you're based in the US, or if you're based in places that have enacted stimulus measures to protect mid and smaller business, do you apply for those benefits? Are you entitled to them? Are you not? I was talking informally to colleagues, and this is just entirely anecdotal, has no scientific value. I have the impression that at least in the US, small practices are heavily split on whether or not the CARES Act, the Stimulus Act, applies to law firms or not, and especially when the firms have been able to work remotely. So there are some very interesting and challenging topics that management has to face. We're talking a lot about the inward-looking aspect of the new normal, and how it is that we continue to work and to organize ourselves. But of course, there's a very fundamental outward-looking aspect to our practices, which is we need to work for clients and we need to zealously represent them. Sibylle, how's the new normal in your relationship with clients? How has COVID-19 impacted day-to-day communications and the handling of files for clients?
Thank you, Aníbal. Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say, paying of invoices, as you just mentioned, can be an issue. I think this is something we will all be faced with. Some clients are better than others, but I think the situation is difficult, so it's even more important to have a good relationship with your client and agree on terms which are doable for all parties involved. Coming to the relationship, yeah, well, we are a larger firm, so not all of our clients are actually located in Germany. Quite a lot of them are international, so you're used to simply maybe meeting them over the phone, or if they are here, meeting them for coffee or lunch or on the Oktoberfest. However, with COVID-19, this is no longer possible, or at least to some extent not possible. You are really focusing on email communication or VC Teams meetings, etc. And what I had to experience in the last weeks and months, while people were fine having me on the phone, they now would like to go on VCs, on Teams meetings, be it Zoom, be it whatever. It's a bit strange, but this is simply, I think, the new normal as well. You try to have as much social contact as possible, even if it's only via the phone or via a VC. But what I think is important in this regard is the following: not only we are working from home, most of us at least, but our clients do the same. So when we are having contacts with them, be it on the phone or VC, we experience much more from their private life. So I think we get a more closer contact to them. We see what they might be struggling with on a day-to-day basis, things we have never experienced before. So which on the one hand might be challenging because they might not have the documents we need. On the other hand, I think personal-wise, the situation gives us the opportunity to build a much closer, much deeper relationship to each of our clients, and then which could last very much longer or could result in further work or at least a good relationship in future.
That's very clear. I liked your comment about how the new normal really gives you more of an insight into people's personal lives. You get to see someone else's children. Yours get to be seen by others, and your personal space. In a way, it can help reinforce human bonds, which is a very nice aspect of our practice. Clarence, turning to you, I mean, what would you share about relationship with clients, and in particular, are you dealing with new clients? How do you face a beauty contest with the client in this new normal?
That's a tough question to answer. I think I would start off by saying that besides new clients, the first caveat is that we are likely to get new matters from existing clients. In the last couple of weeks, the UIA has a few different seminars by different commissions talking about how their practice area has been affected by COVID-19. So that would be one area that might surface. But the other point is that sometimes with all this enforced silence, you find that some clients will resurrect dormant matters that they had with you in the past. For me, it's very commonly will be the drafting of their wills or their powers of attorney if they lose mental capacity, and somehow or other this comes back on the agenda. But as for the question about the beauty contest, I think three ideas I have is, one, it's not a new idea, is being more visible, having your online presence. For some, it could be by having a web site for your firm, updating your LinkedIn profile, or if there are special lawyer directories in your jurisdiction, not just those by the bar, but those in your particular area, then it might be a good idea to be present on this website. It's not that the word of mouth referrals are not relevant, but prospective clients may follow up to do their due diligence to check on your background before engaging you. The next point I would say is to be accessible during this period, to provide meta updates in a manner which a client is comfortable with. So clients have different preferences for technology. Some prefer WhatsApp, some prefer Skype, some prefer Zooming. And often we find that we have to meet the clients in a manner which they are most comfortable at. Lastly, I would just add that in this time, we try to offer convenience, but there are also certain limits we have to bear in mind, because some documents you could witness through video conferencing, but certain documents I would not be comfortable with. I wouldn't witness a will or a lasting power of attorney because I wouldn't feel that I have the ability to assess a person's mental capacity, as wonderful as Zoom is. So these are the points I would think about.
That's great. Thank you, Clarence. Jim, what would you have to add to the client relationships topic?
I'm very interested in the remarks that both Sibylle and Clarence made. I came from a background of practicing with a large law firm, and I always thought it was important to go out to meet with the client at its place of business, to inspect whatever the problem was. If I were still doing that, and I've now been retired from that type of practice for about 12 years. If I were still doing that, given what's going on today, I would think it very difficult to have the types of conferences that we used to have. Now, it may turn out in 1 or 2 years from now that it will be perfectly all right to sit with a client in the client's office and talk about the problem. But as I'm understanding what's happening at this point, at least in the US, I think that's going to be very difficult. In terms of my practice now, where I do nothing but arbitrate and mediate cases, most of the time I don't hear from the client until they call me and say, we'd like to use you as an arbitrator, and we by telephone schedule the hearing date. So the difficulty of working within the new normal doesn't occur until we actually have to have the mediation or the arbitration, and we can talk about what happens at that point when we get to the next subject. So I'm uncertain as to how this is going to affect client relationships, except to say I think that probably they're going to be more distant, less close.
Thank you very much, Jim. And I think that's a nice segue into the next topic that we were hoping to address. Two of you in the panel, Sibylle and James, have really disputes practices. How are disputes practices affected nowadays with the new normal? You were starting to talk, Jim, about your being appointed as an arbitrator or a mediator in cases. How people making filings with you, or to the extent that you know with the courts, how are they submitting briefs now? If access to hard copies, while not impossible, it's certainly more challenging than it used to be before.
You were asking Sibylle, or you were asking me?
I was asking you, Jim.
All right, fine. The answer to your question is that in civil cases, and I'm not addressing criminal cases at all, that's an entirely separate problem. I'm finding that there is more frequent demand for a neutral, an arbitrator or a mediator, than there was in the past. And the reasons for that I can explain, but I'd like to hear what Sibylle says before I talk about that.
Okay. If you're okay with that, Aníbal.
I am, Sibylle. The floor is yours.
All right. So, well, in Germany, we do have the principle of oral arguments in state court hearings, meaning the court will schedule an oral hearing and the parties will usually attend. We do not have this excellent speeches my UK or US colleagues do have, but we do our oral arguments, nevertheless relying mostly on briefs. So with COVID-19, we had the issue that oral hearings were somehow difficult with all the social distancing, etc. And what we experienced is that court hearings were quite frequently postponed, even though the German Code of Civil Procedure explicitly entitles video conferences. Nevertheless, one has to admit that our German courts so far, to quite some extent, lack the required technical tools. They are starting now to improve. So what we've seen, at least in Munich, is new video conferencing systems implemented. So I think there will be quite a change. Nevertheless, at the moment, the situation is as follows. Hearings take place again. You have to bring along a self-declaration stating who you are, where you can be reached, how old you are, etc. so that if there is a case of COVID-19 later on found out in a court, they can find you and test you. Secondly, you have to wear a mask to go to court. If you're lucky, the judge entitles you not to wear it through the hearing, but nevertheless, there are quite a lot of distances between the others, and there are plexiglasses used in order to ensure healthy. And I think the COVID-19 actually will result in a shift to more technical equipment in the courts, but so far in Germany, we're still, at least to quite some extent, one has to say, focused on really attending in court and trying to make it work. But I'm usually only doing civil court cases, so I can't elaborate on any criminal cases as well.
And you recently had a couple of hearings, court hearings, right, Sibylle?
Yeah.
So what you're telling us is based on your very recent experience.
Yeah, last week.
Good. I hope they went well. To have the outcome.
Always.
May I say a couple of words at this point?
Of course.
I want to comment on Sibylle's remarks. I'm interested to hear that German courts are now functioning quite well. Here in New York, the courts are basically shut down. You can file a claim, but you will not get a hearing in the near future. And I think the chief judge plans that to go on pretty much till the end of this year. So the consequence of that is that arbitrations and mediations have become more common. And I think that's going to increase as time goes on.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. So we've been talking about disputes. Clarence was mentioning before there's life outside disputes, and you have really, Clarence, a non-dispute related practice. How's your new normal in dealing with governmental bodies, statutory bodies, or regulators, or other law firms, the people whom you usually have on the other side from your transactions?
Well, I will highlight four main categories. The first one would be government bodies. For many of them, it's not a problem. You have to do searches on the property or searches on the buyer, the seller, for example. And all of these searches are available online. One of the tricky points is that even though in the last couple of years, many title deeds have been increasingly digitalized, but you still need to submit the hard copy documents at the land authority. So currently, for title deeds that are not totally digitalized, the counters are closed. So there's a bit of delay on that front. The same thing applies for probate practice. Usually the courts want to see the original will to make sure that the will has not been tampered with. So the counters are closed as well. Moving from government bodies, we find that the banks want, even after the title deed is digitalized, they want the security documents delivered to them as well. Sometimes we have to collect new instructions and new security documents from the banks. So there's still this hard copy exchange. Because I do real estate, we also move towards completion, and completion is exchange of cashier's order and with documents. So if we call for a loan release, typically we need to collect the cashier's order and to give it to the buyer's representative on exchange. Now, a third category would be, of course, our professional colleagues, other law firms, other lawyers. Email is so ubiquitous these days, but I'm sure many practices still use the fax machine. And I discovered, I'm sure many of you already know this, but I had to figure out how to turn my fax machine to an electronic fax so that I could get faxes coming in to my home instead of having to pick them up physically. And I was thinking, why use fax as opposed to email? But when you send a fax over to somebody, you always have a timestamp to show that you have delivered document. Whereas I don't think you could do it that effectively as email. You never know whether the other party has received it or has been gone into its junk mail, or fair enough, been overlooked in the avalanche of emails that he may have received. I'm not sure if anyone has raised the fact that our clients often have to sign affidavits or statutory declarations. So, and they need to sign them before a commissioner for oath, not from my firm, but from a different firm. So fortunately, there is provision for that to be done online, but I need to arrange a three-way meeting between my client, myself, and the commissioner. But for notarization, I'm not sure, you can't do that by video conferencing at the moment. I'm not sure if it's the same in your jurisdictions. So there's a contrast between commissioning and notarization. The last party that I will mention is we have to recall our own service providers. Many of us will have not just one, but quite a few different service providers, from your overall IT to your photocopying machine or the software providers to you, and I had to deal with many of them remotely during this period as well.
Thank you very much, Clarence. I was working last week with a lawyer based in Bolivia, and Bolivia has a legal regime on which I claim no particular knowledge, but he told me the legal system there tends to be very formalistic and a little bit rigid, still requiring physical signatures for many documents, some contracts, wills. He said the government had enacted a decree about 3 or 4 weeks ago, allowing for, and in fact encouraging, the use of electronic signature in legal documents. And he said this is a bit of a revolution for us here in Bolivia, where all significant contracts are usually papered up the old way, with people even exchanging pens at the end. And he said, I think one of the unintended effects of the crisis is going to be the worldwide adoption of electronic signature and electronic means of communication. And it seems to me, based on what you were just saying, that that's your take too. Is that right?
Well, there's an Electronic Signatures Act as well, but I think certain documents are excluded. So I don't think you could sign a will with an electronic signature, for example. For other types of documents, there's that possibility. So who knows what will turn up. I am wondering myself, in terms of the security documents, the mortgages, or the assignments that we have the client execute in favor of the banks. It's signed in wet ink, is scanned with the certain documents are scanned with the land authority, but the bank still wants the original security documents. So I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure.
So you're saying it's unclear what the future will bring, and that's the last topic I wanted to address briefly in today's session before we open up for questions from the audience. I know it's very hard to make predictions, and Jim, you really started the session by wondering what the future may have in store for us. Let's pick up the conversation on that topic. What lasting effects, if any, do you think the coronavirus will have on the rendering of legal services?
Well, I do think that in terms of law firms, we're going to see more lawyers practice from a distance, whether at their home or something other than the office. I don't think that that will affect the quality of the legal services that are coming out. I think that the one good thing out of this is that lawyers of skill will continue to do well and provide good legal services. I think we will become ever more dependent on technology, and in general, I believe that improves the quality of the legal services that are provided. I think that this virus will have a troubling effect on many law firms because many law firms are dependent on credit and run with very little profit margins, and the strain of what has been caused by the virus on those firms will undoubtedly have a negative effect on the firms. By that I mean they will hire fewer lawyers, they will have reduced staffing, and they will operate as smaller law firms. But if you wonder about the quality of the legal services that are coming out after the virus, I don't have great worry there. I think good lawyers will continue to prosper. That's enough on that for the present.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. Still talking about the lasting effect of coronavirus on the provision of services. Sibylle, there's been some degree of opposition to lockdown measures around the world, and that has come from different quarters and been based on very different arguments. How about law firms? Are you seeing pushback from law firms against lockdown measures and measures somehow restricting freedom of movement? And how do you think the law firms which may have opposed or been vocal against these measures, how will they emerge from this debate? Will they be, are they espousing a publicly supported cause? Are they not? What will the outcome of the debate be in your mind?
Well, I have to say, at first I didn't see a lot of pushbacks. I think first of all, people were quite diligent and prudent and knew there needed to be something to be done. But now things are changing where the lockdown is lifted slowly. So what we see is that law firms act not only for individuals who want to act against certain legal measures which obligate them, for example, to go 2 weeks into quarantine after coming from another country, such as Sweden. There was one recent case where the courts held that this was not legal to do so. Then there were other cases which related to corporations, which are retailers in particular, who went against laws stating that only a retailer with a maximum size of 800 square meter with shops was entitled to reopen, but the other ones had to wait for another 1 or 2 weeks. So what we see is there are a number of firms acting against it, and in Germany, I don't see any risks for them, rather to the detriment. If you can show that you really can argue a case, this will rather help you to get more business. There's no pressure or something like that on lawyers. It's rather to some extent maybe on judges. Then you hear statements from the politicians that these judges or these judgments make politics more difficult for them or things like that. So I think for us lawyers, it's rather another field of work. For the judges, it's sometimes challenging and difficult, but nevertheless, I think what I've seen so far, the judgments were very well argued, and I could totally understand that some of the legislation which was passed very quickly in the course of COVID-19 was not upheld.
So thank you very much, Sibylle. Clarence, talking about the future and the lasting legacy of the virus, how's the firm of the future going to look like in the wake of all these changes that we're going through?
I think I'll make 2 points, but a third slightly contradictory point. First point is that there'll be greater investment in technology. Second point is that we'll strive for greater technological competence. But the third contradictory point is that we have to caution against an extreme swing to entirely electronic communication. I think with the first 2 points, greater investment in technology and greater technological competence, we have to realize that there are quite a lot of questions which arise for us individually and for the firm we practice in. This could be where can this technology be applied, or where can't it be applied, or where will it work poorly. It could work poorly because you still have reluctant clients or reluctant third parties. It takes 2 hands to be able to use technology together. And there's also the cost of adoption, because every investment you make, there's a hardware and there's a software and the license fees which need to be renewed every year or every couple of years. And it's not just for oneself, but one's support staff. Now, allied with this question is, of course, one can ask, how much technology must I personally know? How much should I expect others to know, my colleagues, my future hires, and how much should I reasonably spend on? How much can I afford? I might not need to have all the various different products, so I have to think which is best suited for my practice, my firm. But lastly, and the contradictory point, which I think Sibylle raised as well, and Jim shared from his years of practice, is that video interaction won't be the same as meeting face to face, especially if it's for your medium client for the first time, or even for your regular client. So we'll probably have to have a hybrid arrangement depending on the circumstances. Yes, I could see more things becoming electronic, but I'm still not too sure about wills being signed by electronic signatures. I could be wrong, but there's always be some time for people to catch up. So we always have to exist in some hybrid situation depending on our practice areas.
Yes.
Well, it's occurred to me that I don't want to say this is a positive development, but a development of the arrival of the virus has been that new areas of law to be addressed by attorneys have emerged. I've been reading about the number of businesses that are making claims against their insurance companies, arguing that the pandemic was a risk that they should be insured for. So there's certainly room for growth in the insurance law area. Certainly hospitals and nursing homes in the US are under incredible pressure as a result of the virus, and lawyers who have the skill to help those institutions have a rich number of opportunities to provide services. And of course, in contract law, how many of us have argued cases involving force majeure or frustration of contract? Those are unique areas of law that there are going to be opportunities to provide services for simply because of the coronavirus. So I think there are opportunities for growth around because of this incident?
I said exactly the same way. It's both challenge and opportunity, right?
Yes.
I think the legal world has probably hit pause for a few weeks as it was trying to recover from and digest the impact of the pandemic. But it is quickly realigning itself and looking for ways to continue rendering services and reactivate or restart those practices that might have been more significantly affected, but also at the same time immediately finding new areas of business and new cases that may be taken on as a result of all these measures. I'm thinking of people in healthcare, administrative law, very busy, labor and employment, insurance and reinsurance are very busy. Construction work is also heavily impacted by COVID-19, force majeure declarations and the like. Yes. The slightly more niche world of investment arbitration is also impacted as governments enact measures that are sometimes challenged by investors who claim they've been impaired by the measures. It's a fascinating time to live in. I'll make this remark especially for the audience. We had set aside some time, and I think it would start pretty much now, for questions from the audience. We have a live chat here on the screen, which it might be my own misreading. I don't think any questions have been received thus far, but by all means, those of you listening to us, feel free to ask any questions. I don't think you can do that through the microphone, but if you can get into that chat and raise any items where you would like to hear our panelists elaborate on, that'd be fantastic. I'll also remind everyone that we remain available even after the program. As you probably detected, our three panelists have been exposed to a wide array of challenges and issues in the last few weeks. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation offline after the session, you will find our panelists and myself, of course, available to do that. As we wait for questions to trickle in, I'd like to also ask those of you on the screen on the panel already. There's an issue we didn't really touch on, except that Jim raised it at the end in his remarks. It's probably worth talking a little bit more about it, and that's recruiting and the effect of the crisis on new legal talent. You might recall that the 2008-2010 financial crisis came with some aftershocks, and one of those was some reluctance from, at least in the US, people to go to law school. If you were a 21, 22-year-old trying to decide what to do with your life, suddenly law school had become a little bit of a less appealing prospect. Hires were on freeze. People had been let go, especially from some of the largest practices. Part of the perceived charm in the practice of law was now gone. I'm very interested in your views. I'll say I think things are a little bit different now, even though superficially we might be experiencing some of the same effects we saw in the 2008-2010 crisis. I think both the root causes and the lasting effects of the new situation are very different from what we saw then. And I'm not persuaded that we're going to see the lack of interest in law school that we saw about 12 years ago. I don't know, Jim, you raised the issue before. I don't know if you'd like to make any predictions.
I can't tell you whether the current class of graduating from college intends to proceed to law school or not. Those numbers are not in. I think the transfer of students from college to law school has been fairly stable for the last maybe 5 years, maybe a slight growth, but it certainly is not anywhere near as robust as it was, say, 10 years ago. In terms of law firm hiring, I called the manager of recruitment from my old law firm and asked her what's going on. And she said, by and large, excuse me, most law firms are holding off on hiring for the time being. They want to see what's going to happen over the next 6 months. So I don't say it's a desperate situation, but it's certainly, if I were thinking about going to law school and investing the amount of money that you have to spend to go to law school today, I probably would wait a year or two and see how the market rebounds.
That's
good to hear what Sibylle says.
That's, I think, a very perceptive approach. Sibylle, what do you think? You were already called.
Well, I think yes, within the next month, there won't be that many new people coming on board or not be hired. That will be quite a challenge. I totally agree. So if I were a student, and here in Germany we have the different concept, you immediately go to from school, you immediately go to law school, like that. You do study laws from the beginning. So if I were a student now, I mean, it takes you 5 to 6 years to really finish. So I think now would be a good time to start. I would really feel very uncomfortable if I were now shortly from terminating my studies. So for those, I really fear, because the situation is not easy here in Germany at present. No.
Yeah. Clarence.
Well, I think there'll still be attractiveness for prospective students to go to law school. Whether or not they carry on as lawyers after that will be another question. The attrition rate is quite high after a couple of years that they drop out. So that seems to be my observations locally.
I agree. It's uncertain times. I'll be perhaps a bit of a contrarian, at least with respect to some of the remarks that were recently made. I think there's a time of uncertainty now, but there are practices which are already very busy now, and we alluded to some of them. And even those that may have hit pause for a few weeks or months will surely pick up in the not too distant future. I was talking to a friend who does project finance at a big global firm last week, and he said, listen, we haven't been very busy the last 4 or 5 weeks, but now we're starting to realize there might be wonderful opportunities in some of the jurisdictions most affected by the crisis. There might be opportunities to do projects in better conditions at better prices than before. So we're looking at the bright side of things. He was predicting a very immediate pickup in work, which I think it's probably a good assessment. And I think what we saw back in 2008 for once may happen again, which is even though there are some differences in the crisis, one of the common features that we are likely to see now is that law firms will realign themselves, right? Practices in 2008, 2009, there were some practices that became very inactive, and frankly, you haven't seen them again in elite big law firms. Whereas other new practices suddenly came in and became very dominant, just beyond being the flavor of the month. I think right now, if you're in healthcare, you're likely going to be very busy the next few years. And if you're a firm that didn't have a healthcare practice before, you might be interested in thinking about developing one for the months and years to come, as that might look like an insured stream of business. So I think we'll see some realignment, but not necessarily a significant drop in overall activity. There will be a realignment in the activities, but hopefully not a drop in the total amount of work that gets to be done. I think we've gone a little bit past our allocated time. So I think it's probably time to thank our audience and thank each of our panelists, Clarence, Jim, and Sibylle. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for everyone who made time to join us today. And thank you, of course, to Colette Serine and the UIA for organizing the seminar and facilitating it. So it's challenging times. I hope we will all remain in touch and be well in the weeks and months to come. And if not in Guadalajara in the next few months, hopefully some other time and some other place very soon, we will be able to see each other again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.